Ladies and gentlemen, it's the first Football Scoop podcast of the new year, 2023. We're back, baby! Great to see everybody. I am Scott Roussel. Got college football experts Zach Barnett, John Brice. Both of them look fantastic as usual. For those of you who are following along on YouTube, enjoy the good vibes. For those of you listening along in your car, and I know a lot of you guys are, because we saw so many guys at the AFCA Convention in Charlotte, and so many guys said, hey, I love the podcast. Can we get that going again? You know, we're on the road recruiting. Would love something to listen to. So appreciate everybody listening. I'll tell you, the numbers of downloads and everything have been going through the roof, which is fantastic. It is our intent to do a lot more with this podcast in this upcoming year. During the season, you know, it's hard to ask coaches to take time away from their team and jump on a podcast. Just didn't feel right to us. So we're holding that for this spring, and we intend to do a lot of that this spring. Should be a lot of fun. Everybody always likes to have fun with Zach and his picks. Zach looks at me like I'm crazy. Just fun stuff. Get to know us. We love what we do at Football Scoop. With that said, gentlemen, any thoughts from the convention? I had a great time. Great seeing a bunch of guys. It was better attended than I thought might be the case. And speaking with a bunch of guys the week before, a bunch of guys weren't going. There was official visits going on that weekend, leading up to. It was a condensed format, but there was pretty good turnout, I thought.
Yeah, the timing of the convention was one of the hot topics of the convention, and obviously the changing world that we're living in. There's not really a perfect time to do it. If someone has it, I'd be all ears. But I enjoy personally it's part of the rhythm of the year. I enjoy going every year. First full week in January or whatever it is. It's great to see people, great to meet new people. Really enjoyed hearing Dabo speak on Sunday night. He was the opening speaker. Was great. Was extremely Dabo. And then it was great to hear Willie Fritz and Brett Bielema speak on Monday. For a couple of years, the AFCA kind of got away from the FBS head coach. I'm going to give you an hour on my program. I thought those were always the highlights of the event for me. And so it was great to see them get back to that.
For me, I think one of the big things was absolutely meeting a lot of new people and getting to just interact with so many coaches that we all have so much respect for and hear the topics that were important to them. I think the schedule is very much front and center, forefront for a lot of those guys in their minds. So many coaches couldn't come in until late Sunday evening or even Monday morning. I visited with Chancey Stuckey from Notre Dame. He flew in Monday morning and back out Monday night because of the scheduling demands and because what Notre Dame had in terms of hosting some visitors like many others the weekend before, and then needing to squeeze in a couple more days off before heading back on the road and also hosting recruits that subsequent weekend. So I think the calendar is a huge issue for a lot of coaches. There's concern there. Obviously, the other big ones are the transfer portal window. We're coming up on the close of it later this afternoon, the first new 45-day window. And then obviously NIL is the other dominant topic, whether it was addressed in plenty of the sessions as it was, or whether it was more candidly addressed in some of the walk-around conversations as it was. I think that's the number one thing playing out right now in college football. It's exactly what we're seeing right now with the University of Florida and the Jaden Rashada situation that's just complete and utter chaos. To me, those are the primary topics spinning out of the convention. And then, a highlight was getting to attend some of the various events as well as hosting our event, Scott, as you graciously do every year, and just seeing how we completely flooded the lobby of the Westin to the point that other media were trolling through our party, which is testament to you, Scott, and what you've built for 20 plus years. And then the last thing in terms of my highlights would be, of course, midnight breakfast with you gentlemen at like the Red Spot Diner in downtown Charlotte.
Great fun. I would agree.
By the way, shout out to John for multitasking today, podcasting with us while flying high above South Bend in his Cessna 172. So I salute you, John.
Hey, you want to give me a hard time? These were my Christmas gift from Jess, along with a case, as Scott well knows, of the impossible to find Pappy Van Winkle bourbon-aged cigars. And so I will proudly rock the nicest headphones I have ever owned, completely courtesy of my superstar wife.
Great headphones. He had a great – I don't think it was a cardigan. It kind of looked like a cardigan. We're not going to talk about that. Anyway, moving right along.
You're wearing peach today. Don't talk to me about cardigans when I've got on Nike swag.
It's great looking stuff too, by the way. By the way, I really enjoyed listening to Willie Fritz and Brett Bielema, like you mentioned, Zach. One of the most interesting things, or little tidbits. Every time you go to the convention, you hear little coaching tidbits. One of the ones that I picked up on came from a high school coach. And I've shared this with several coaches, and I'm not sure everybody agrees with me, but I thought it was a great idea. He said their Thursday, game week, high school ball, game's Friday night. So he said they moved their Thursday practice to be 5:45 a.m. And they did that for a couple of reasons. One, Thursday walkthrough, after school, you don't get much done. It's not all that much. It's a special teams refresh. It's a keep them light, in and out type thing. And he said, we do it at 5:45 in the morning because the kids are fresh in the morning. They actually can learn. They actually look forward to it. And they have to go to bed early that night. They have to wake up early. It makes them tired Thursday night to actually go to bed Thursday night. So they're actually a little bit better rested for a Friday game. I thought that made a lot of sense. Gave coaches Thursday afternoon, evening with their families, which I thought was huge. Great idea. I'm always looking for ways to improve work-life balance for coaches. So I love that idea. Not sure everybody else did, but I thought it was a good idea.
It's fascinating to see, we've been playing this game here for 150 years, and you'd think we'd have everything figured out. And it's fascinating to see when someone comes up with a new edge or a new wrinkle, something like that.
Yeah. Coming out of the convention, the convention's the same time as the national championship game. Georgia was just dominant. It was unbelievable. The game itself was unbelievable. Georgia just flexed and did everything they wanted to do. And you felt really great for Georgia and Kirby. Kirby's poured his life into the place, and that staff and those players. And you felt really good. And they're on such a high. And then they had such a tragic event happen after they're celebrating. They're back home and they have the parade and celebration at Sanford. And later that night, early the next morning, they had this terrible single car accident, and a staff member died, a player died, and another staff member player, injured to varying degrees. It's a reminder from God. It's a terrible, and that's the wrong term, but you're at the highest of highs, and you get brought back down. And our prayers with all those impacted. It's just a terrible time for Georgia football coming off of such a high.
I would concur and know that we all have some various friends at Georgia that is a very stark reminder of the life. So there's no other word me to describe it.
Yeah, John, I think your headphones are cutting in and out a little bit there. I apologize. It's a tough time, and just praying for all those people and for their families. And I know it's going to be a hard time. I know a lot of people in the coaching profession reach out to support their brothers and sisters in Georgia, just to say, I love you and I got you. And tough time.
It just goes to show that no amount of real world success can immune you from real world tragedy. I mean, you strive and strive and strive to get to where Georgia is, and something like this happens. The worst can happen to any of us at any time. And so it's a reminder to be grateful for what we have while we have it.
Amen. Amen to that. Talking football a little bit, big news. So NFL head coaching openings are out there. Some GM stuff is getting settled right now. They're shifting very strong focus towards making some hires. Now that some of the in-person things can happen with the playoff timing is all going down. Jim Harbaugh had been involved in some conversations, particularly with the Broncos. Harbaugh decided that he's not going to be the guy for the Broncos, and hence is going to stay with Michigan. I thought it was really fascinating the way that came out. The president of the university, Santa Ono, had shared publicly that he really supported Jim, and Jim really appreciated Santa's statement, which was interesting. And then Jim decides he's going to stay, and he tells the president. And the president releases a statement that Jim and I had a great talk, and I'm going to inform the athletic director that Jim's staying. And then Jim makes a statement. He's grateful for the president's support. No mention of the athletic director. You're like, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I feel like that was interesting. I feel like there's something going on there between Jim and the athletic director. And then we all knew there was an investigation going on, but this whole deal about offense coordinator's computer access inquiry by the police. What's going on? I didn't
So
ask.
I saw a note. I think I saw this a tweet from someone, and of course, you always get the best when you can't even cite who it's from. But their information was that it was not Matt Weiss is not being investigated for any sort of federal crime. So I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer, but any sort of federal crime that your mind jumps to is apparently not on the table here. What could they possibly be investigating for if it's not federal? I don't know. But I believe that the worst of the worst is thankfully reportedly off the table there. And to spin back to what you talked to, or what you were talking about at Michigan, like for years and years and years, a decade and a half, they thrived. If we could just get the edge on Ohio State, if we could just, get back to where Michigan should be, we've won the Big Ten 2 times in a row, we pounded Ohio State, played for the playoff, then everything will be perfect. And here they are, and everything's not perfect in Michigan. They still got their problems. It's impossible not to notice that Ward Manuel seems to be kind of boxed out of the decision-making process in regards to Jim's place there. What does that mean? I don't know. And then if you're Michigan, Jim said last winter he nearly took the Vikings job. That fell through for whatever reason. He was like, I'm done. I wanted to win a Super Bowl. I wanted to take the Vikings job. Didn't happen. I'm done. And then Scott, throughout the fall was like, Jim's going to be a factor in the NFL when it comes time. And I'm like, he said he was done. He's Jim Harbaugh. He said he was done. And then winter rolls around, he wasn't done. And so fast forward to this time next year, it seems like there's going to be NFL openings, and it seems like Jim's going to be a factor in those. What jobs are going to be open? No one has any idea, but I can tell you Jim's going to be a factor in the NFL cycle for as long as he's at Michigan. And so is that another 10 years that we have to do this in Ann Arbor, or is that another 1 year? Nobody knows. But at this point now, it's part of your annual calendar if you're a Michigan fan, if you're a Michigan employee, that Jim's gonna spend 2 weeks, a month, looking for NFL jobs, and maybe he gets one, maybe he doesn't.
I don't particularly consider myself a conspiracy theorist whatsoever, and I would also say that right now the University of Michigan is an absolute clown show when you factor in the very public pursuit and acknowledgments of Harbaugh's dalliances with NFL teams, when you factor in that Harbaugh and Michigan are under investigation for alleged NCAA recruiting violations, including perhaps misleading NCAA investigators, a level 1 charge, and then also this investigation on top of that, and then just these bizarre statements, including, as you guys so astutely note, coming from the president as the voice being so actively involved in athletics is very surprising to me. The other thing I would note is, in speaking with coaches and discussing with people, I had coaches call me even after the statements came out and say, dog, I'm still not convinced that Jim Harbaugh is staying at Michigan. And if you look at his statement and you parse it word by word, it says, my heart is at Michigan. Don't try to out happy. It never once says I'm unequivocally staying at Michigan. I promise I will be Michigan's coach in 2023. Until every NFL job is filled and at the head coach's level, I will not be fully convinced of Jim Harbaugh returning to the University of Michigan for the 2023 football season. And that's based on numerous conversations with coaches who equally are not as convinced. And these are not necessarily coaches that are recruiting against Michigan right now out on the road or in the transfer portal. These are some NFL coaches as well.
Share with you guys something that I heard that I thought was interesting regarding Michigan, Ohio State, and really the SEC. I'm in the airport, I'm leaving the AFCA, and I'm like 4 hours early. I had just seen John Brice. And so, I got time to kill. I run into a big boy defensive coordinator, and he asked my thoughts about the game, and we talked for about 10 minutes. And I'm about to say what he said, and then I go sit with like 6 coaches, and they all said the same thing. It was fascinating that it came from all these different angles. They said, given a month, any team can beat any team. TCU gets healthy. They got all this time to scheme Michigan up. And TCU did to Michigan what they did, right? When you got to come back the next week and the next week, as the playoff expands and you got to go week to week to week, it's so favored. According to all these coaches I'm talking to, these are all, FBS Power 5 type guys. They said it so favors the depth of the SEC. And I think it's fair to include Michigan and Ohio State because they have that depth also that some other programs don't have. But they're like, you're just not going to see anybody can win one game. Can you string together 3, as the playoff expands? And they're like, you're going to wind up seeing SEC versus SEC. That's what all these guys are saying. That's what you're going to see in the national championship game going forward. That was interesting.
Yeah. So 2 notes there. One, John Brice has landed the Cessna and he's back on a solid green turf. So that's good to see. And 2, the national championship game looked like a 5A school against a 3A school. And I hate to say that as one of the nation's biggest Big 12 homers, but it was just a different class of athlete. And, the first drive, that was apparent. And TCU, for all the scheme talent they have on the headsets, you can't out-scheme that sort of physical mismatch. And then I guess point number 3 in my 2-point bulletin is that I think one thing people need to understand is that expanding the playoff isn't necessarily about getting non-SEC teams or expanding access to the national championship game. It's very possible we could see 3 straight years of Alabama, Georgia. It's going to make it harder for Cinderellas to win the national championship game, but it's about the theory, and your mileage may vary if this will be successful or not, but the theory is it's going to make the regular season better because your Pac-12 is shut out from the playoff for 2/3 of the season, and an Oregon State game that has Pac-12 championship implications could then have national implications. And so the theory is it's going to make late August through mid-December even better because Tulane is now involved in the national championship. Oregon State are now involved in the national championship hunt. Kansas State's involved in the national championship hunt. And then you might get an upset or 2, but by mid-January, it's going to be the big boys. And there's nothing really anybody can do about that. But it's not necessarily about getting that one game better. It's about making all the other games more interesting.
For me, I think we'll see. I agree with Zach in a lot of ways. I think we'll still have a chance to see plenty of upsets in those 5-12, 6-11, 7-10, 8-9 games. But as I already discussed with Scott, and look, this is going to drive people nuts, but it's factual. I'm going to tell you how the TCU Georgia game was a reflection on the University of Alabama, and it's because of the size of the support staffs at SEC programs. These off-the-field quality control and analysts are so deeper and so superior at SEC programs, and it revolves back to Nick Saban starting this very shortly after his arrival in Tuscaloosa when he completely brought in the NFL model that, look, we saw Florida implement a year ago as it hired Billy Napier. Billy Napier took less money on the front end of his deal to have a 50-plus person staff at the University of Florida to completely mimic what Alabama has, what Georgia now has, what NFL front offices have. When Georgia can prepare for these playoffs and still have a non-position coach such as a Mike Bobo, who's been an SEC offensive coordinator all over the place, a head coach at Colorado State, seen so much, when he can still be working ahead and doing some advanced stuff. We saw Brian Kelly do a masterful job of adding some really quality analysts this past season after his arrival at LSU. He's got John Jancic on staff there, who's been a high-level SEC defensive coordinator. So again, I think because of that, it's the physicality and depth of SEC rosters, but do not discount the off-the-field talent depth of SEC coaching staffs. And I think that's a huge component.
Zach, I appreciate you mentioning Tulane. It brought me back to Tulane beating USC. So I grew up in New Orleans. So, you're uptown and you're right there. So you grew up cheering for the Wave a little bit. Sean King has that magical undefeated season. It's incredible. So my kids watching me react to Tulane coming and getting SC. My kids are like, Dad, you're going crazy. I'm like, it's Tulane beating USC. This is insane. It was awesome. That's what college football is all about. Good times. All right, so jumping forward, A&M had made a run at Garrett Riley, right? And some others had talked to Garrett Riley. And Clemson winds up getting him. Clemson, as I understand the way that search went, Dabo said, "Hey, who won the Football Scoop Offense Coordinator of the Year?" Oh, Garrett Riley. All right, well, give me him. So Garrett Riley goes there. So TCU has avoided offense coordinator. John Brice, the latest as of this morning is?
I think all of us have worked on this. Zach especially has been extremely diligent on the TCU offensive coordinator search, but we all have multiple sources in the SEC and in the Big 12 and in specific programs telling us that Kendal Briles to TCU is a mere formality at this point. Let's remember, as I noted earlier in this podcast, the transfer portal window for the NCAA closes later this afternoon today here on Wednesday. That to me means we'll see a lot more movement in the coming days around college football, not just at the University of Arkansas and TCU, but all indications for our sources are that Kendal Briles is returning to his home state. He will be back in Texas. He will be TCU's next offensive coordinator. And that's, again, the consistent message that I think all of us are hearing from our sources. But this morning, we got it with a much greater air of finality.
It's surprising to me. I think surprising is the right word here, that Sonny, coming off of the incredible season he had, to when his approval rating on a 0 to 100 scale is probably about a 250 with the TCU fan base, to then it's surprising to me that Garrett Riley leaves for $1.75 million at Clemson, that TCU couldn't match or exceed that. And maybe they did, and maybe Garrett Riley is just like, you know what, it's better for my career if I can go get Clemson back to Clemson, then I'll have the choice of any job I want. Maybe that's the case. But what I was surprised to see that TCU couldn't lock him down if Clemson's paying him 1.75. I'm also surprised that of all the offensive coordinators, Sonny wants to spend some of his political capital with the TCU fan base to hire Kendal Briles, of all people. Like, if you were to poll the TCU fan base, who would they least like to have? It's probably Kendal Briles. And I don't want to relitigate the Baylor stuff, but the fact that Baylor is TCU's chief rival and he's Kendal Briles. You could have got Seth Luttrell. You probably could have pulled Graham Harrell out of Purdue. You could have got a lot of guys that I'm not naming here. And you spend your capital hiring him, of all people. Like, he better be really, really good, because that's not going to be a popular hire. And Sonny and Jeremiah Donati, the TCU AD, had better have some good answers of why it's Kendal over anybody else, because it's going to take a good sell job and a lot of points to win over the TCU fan base with this hire.
I don't personally know Kendal. He and I have a lot of mutual friends, which I don't know if that's an indictment of him or a compliment of me. But I'll say this, and I also don't wish to relitigate anything or really overly revisit anything. But out of all of that mess, Kendal Briles never missed a year of coaching. He was kept on staff at Baylor. He was immediately hired by Lane Kiffin. He's been interviewed by the University of Tennessee before going to Arkansas. He's been 3 years at Arkansas. He's been vetted by multiple public institutions. And to me, you have less leeway at a public institution than sometimes a private institution, because so much more is public record. There's so much more of a spotlight in terms of who's paying for what, how is it being paid for, why is this being done at a public institution. But I just say all that to say it's been a long time. Nobody's minimizing whatever the horrific events were there, but he's passed a number of background checks along the way. And then on the field, nobody would take Arkansas's roster, in my opinion, over any number of other SEC West rosters, maybe with the exception of some offensive linemen and things like that. But Kendal Briles has had an offense that scored 30-plus points in 21, 32.5 points this year. They were 4th or 5th in yards per game, I think, in each of those years. They've produced a lot, and he did that this year without KJ Jefferson for part of the time. And so I think Kendal Briles is a very sharp coach. As multiple someone's told me, he's definitely an acquired taste, but he's doing a lot of good. He has great ties in Texas. Recruiting, as we all know, is the super lifeblood of any program, and it's going to only get fiercer in the Lone Star State with Texas's impending addition to the SEC. And so I think there are a number of factors at play here.
I think you saw, I believe you've probably had 10 programs easily hire or try to hire Kendal Briles in the last 7 years. Kind of tells you all you need to know. I mean, he's exceptionally well thought of in what he does, in the field that he does. There's not a lot of guys who you could say that about. So,
if I could make one more point here, and not overlook the Garrett Riley to Clemson hire, I would call this, and you guys heard me use this term a lot over the course of the fall as we were assessing big games. This is a plant your flag moment for Dabo Swinney. A lot of people thought that he would dig in his heels and be completely stubborn and inflexible and refuse to make necessary changes on his Clemson staff, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, out of loyalty. He did not let the direction of his program be tethered to his admirable loyalty. And he went out and got a guy who not only had been tried, who Texas A&M had tried to hire, but it's my understanding that Garrett Riley also was very much a prized candidate at the University of South Florida for its head coaching job, among some other spots. And he takes the Clemson offensive coordinator job instead. Now, the flip side of that is I think there's a phenomenal chance that Clemson, by the time the 24 season rolls around, will be on its third or fourth offensive coordinator in 3 years, because I think that he'll get another opportunity to be a head coach, and this time a year from now, it'll probably be one too good to pass up.
Yeah, after hearing Dabo speak at the AFCA Convention, it wasn't his talk was not a comment on anything that happened this season. It was just kind of a here's what we do, here's who I am, here's why we do these things, and to hear Dabo explain his life story in his own words. I mean, to get from where he came from he, as he would have described himself, an at-risk youth, no college graduates, no college students in his family. Dad was in and out, very much a working class background, and now be the head coach at Clemson, and the success he had. I mean, it's a 1 in a million shot. And I came away from that thinking, I could see why Dabo is the way he is, and I could see why he's so stubborn to a fault, loyal to a fault. I mean, with the way they've won, he's going to ride his guys in his system, and I could see why he's so reticent to change things. And then pretty much the first move he makes after I walk out of there is go hire Garrett Riley. So I didn't think he had the appetite to do that. And so for him to, after that, I was thinking, Clemson was going to be consistently, a top 15 program and not a top 5 program. And now my view is, they're going to move back in the top 10, top 5 and try and recapture, the vibes they had through 2016 to 2018, and not just kind of, be okay where they've been these past 2 seasons.
Yeah, I still think Clemson has to get back to its recruiting levels of some previous years. The Tigers are not there right now, and I do see the ACC improving, especially like a Florida State program that gets Jared Verse to come back, that has started recruiting at a much higher level. Miami has overall recruited well since the addition of Mario Cristobal as head coach, although the Hurricanes may not be hanging on to Cormani McClain, as the 5-star DB appears potentially headed to Deion Prime Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. But still, Clemson makes a really impressive hire. Dabo breaks his mold, and now the Tigers have to address their roster.
I feel like there are another 1,000 topics we could touch on, and that's it for another day. We're going to start doing these a lot more frequently, a lot more velocity coming out at you guys. I'm going to keep this one short, about to cut us off. I feel as if we've touched on Georgia, TCU, Michigan, Ohio State also played in the college football playoff. Ohio State, quick thoughts. Kevin Wilson gets Tulsa. I think we all knew Brian Hartline was going to get promoted. Hartline's going to call the plays. Pretty exciting for him. Hartline has been fantastic at Ohio State. I think he will continue to be fantastic. It's a learning curve there. He's a smart, good football coach. He's going to figure that out. What about some other stuff happening in Ohio State that our listeners would care about? JB, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. NIL continues to be huge at a lot of places. I'm not sure there are very many. It's much more front and center right now than at the Ohio State University. That's a very in-demand topic there in Columbus. It's something that coaches are extremely worried about. It's something that I know for a fact Ryan Day is specifically very concerned about regarding how competitive Ohio State is in the current marketplace for student athletes as it pertains to NIL. shout out to Kevin Wilson, not only for getting a crack at being a head coach again, but I'm absolutely thoroughly impressed with the staff he's put together at Tulsa, a program that's not known for having a lot of money, but I think that it shows you that Kevin Wilson has a great amount of cachet among his peers and is tapping into some really great coaches. When you talk about Matt Guerrieri, hope I pronounced that correctly, Matt, I apologize if not, but I had somebody at Ohio State tell me that Matt Guerrieri arguably was the best coach on either side of the ball in the building this past year in Columbus, and he was in a senior analyst role. And that guy is so well respected. You got Steve Spurrier Jr.
Yep.
You've got Ricky Brown now hired as the special teams coordinator. I just think Kevin Wilson has put together a staff that gives Tulsa a tremendous opportunity to get back way sooner than later. At Ohio State, there's still some staff issues. I'm told that they're very much in pursuit of a couple of former high-profile, especially one notable high-profile former defensive standout that they would like to add to their staff. So I don't think movement's done there, as we discussed earlier in the podcast.
Couple of things on Kevin Wilson's staff, and I know this wasn't our intent to talk Tulsa all day long on this thing, but I know Kevin's very high on his offensive line coach. Adding Greg Fry as tight ends is a big deal, I think. Greg Fry is
really underrated.
He's been with Kevin a long time, a lot of places that they should go like this. The other one, Ron Burton. Burton played with Kevin at North Carolina, and I think they might have been 3 or 4 seasons together in college. So when your college teammate comes to work with you, I mean, that's a big deal. That shows a lot of mutual respect, admiration. We can get this done. You know each other that well. So he's building a nice staff. We'll see where it goes. All right. Any other thoughts on Ohio State before we get out of here?
I just think Ohio State has to up its physicality. I'm sorry, Zach. I think that's a huge thing. I believe I might have touched on this late in the year, but I'll reiterate it because it's been reiterated to me. A number of coaches have said Ohio State is too reliant on being a skill position player-led team instead of an offensive and defensive line player-led team. And I think that translates when they start getting big boyed by some teams, most specifically Michigan, and then in the fourth quarter against Georgia.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you said, Scott. And I could go on and on about the Ohio State receiver room, and I've written about it plenty over the years. But if Brian Hartline is half as good as an offensive coordinator as he was a position coach, look out, because that guy's going to be a fascinating career to follow.
Agreed. All right, guys. Football Scoop Podcast. We love doing this. Going forward, we're going to have a lot of special guests on, coaches and others involved in the game. If anybody wants to be involved, reach out to me. I'm pretty easy to find at Football Scoop on Twitter, Zach_Barnett and John D. Brice 1. We're out there. You know us.
Happy New Year from the Football Scoop reigning man of the year.
He is.
Cheers.
He is. God bless everybody. Talk to y'all soon.